what alpha lipoic acid can do is that it helps in that mitochondria. It helps neutralize free radicals directly. And then at the same time, it recycles your major antioxidants, your glutathione, your vitamin C, your vitamin E. It also upregulates another pathway called the NRF2 pathway. The NRF2 pathway is the pathway that helps you produce more glutathione in your brain as well. So,
Dr. Scott Sherr, when we think of brain, a lot of times people think of brain performance, and they think of what's going to make us, perform better and at this optimal state. But there's almost always this balance of things that are coming at us, things that are affecting our brain negatively, even decreasing our baseline, making it so we're just not able to function at a normal cognitive level, right? And so we get to this point where we feel foggy all the time, but that's normal. Or we feel slow and sluggish all the time, but that's normal. And it's not about just optimizing and increasing the power of the brain. Sometimes it's about protecting the brain from just everyday stress, things that are out there. And you really put a lot of emphasis on this in a lot of your speakings and what you do. What are some things that we can do to protect our brain just throughout daily life so we feel better cognitively?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a really important point there, which is that it's like we wake up one day and we're like, holy shit, what just happened to the last 10 years or something like that? Because it's a slow build for many people. It's not like today you feel fantastic as a 25-year-old, and then the next day you wake up feeling like, no, you would realize that happened. But many people don't realize that it took them a long time to create a toxic burden, most likely mitochondrial stress, cellular stress, inflammation, detoxification issues, all these things that have happened because it's built up over time. Our bodies and our brains are the most resilient between about 21 to 30 years of age. But as soon as that 30-year mark comes, things start going south. And especially when you turn 40 or so, they've actually done some interesting studies looking at how we have these significant age drops, it looks like, around the age of 40, the age of 60 or so, where things kind of really start falling off the wagon for a lot of people. And so it's really important to think about not only, the protection of our brain, but the aspects of what that actually means. People think of protecting your brain like wearing a helmet. And when I was a kid and when you were a kid, we didn't do that. We didn't know that helmets were important. Now we wear helmets to protect our brain from the outside. That is good. So if my kids see somebody that's driving around on a bike, especially a motorcycle in Colorado without a helmet, they go, he's not wearing a helmet. This is terrible. And, medical freedom, whatever, they can do what they want in some states, right? Or not medical freedom, but freedom, whatever you want to call it. But so you can protect your brain from the outside. We know that now, with helmets. Although if you're a football player, we also know that these helmets are not perfect and you're still going to get concussions and things like that. But the question is, and with my patients, is how can we protect our brain from the inside? And that protection is because we're always being subject to so many different things in our environment that we're suffering from.
So, yeah, I kind of look at it. It's exactly like looking at like a TBI from the inside out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
People don't realize the level of neuroinflammation. They don't realize. I remember 10 years ago when I was first starting the channel, it was like talking about inflammation in general was kind of Greek to people. They were like, oh, inflammation, is that just what makes my joints hurt? It's like, well, yes, but no, it's bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
And now I think people have an understanding a little bit more of what inflammation is, but now we're at this next evolution where people don't really understand what neuroinflammation is and this neurological stress and this stress that we're on from the inside out. It's not just about and I know there's ways that we can protect that.
Yeah.
And one of it, I know we talked a little bit offline before we started, was one of my personal favorites was alpha lipoic acid.
Yeah.
What is alpha lipoic acid? How does it potentially protect the brain?
So alpha lipoic acid is one of the unsung antioxidants out there. People have heard of glutathione and vitamin C and vitamin E. Alpha lipoic acid is actually the one that recycles all of those to make them more effective in the body. It's also itself an antioxidant, and it works in the mitochondria specifically to help mop up free electrons. And so when we make energy in our mitochondria, we make waste products of energy. So ATP is made, we make carbon dioxide, we make water, and we also make reactive oxygen species. And these reactive oxygen species are very important. They're actually signaling molecules to have the whole system understand what's actually going on in the mitochondria. But we need to mop these up. We need to neutralize these oxidant molecules so that the system doesn't get under more stress and cause more inflammation and cause all the inflammatory cascades that happen as a result of that. So people have heard of things like NF-kappa B maybe. So NF-kappa B is a pathway that releases a whole bunch of inflammatory mediators like cytokines, like interleukins, TNF-alpha, and others. When the system's under more inflammation, under more stress in the mitochondria, then the whole system, the whole cell itself, and the cellular ecosystem becomes more inflamed. And so what alpha lipoic acid can do is that it helps in that mitochondria, it helps neutralize free radicals directly. And then at the same time, it recycles your major antioxidants, your glutathione, your vitamin C, your vitamin E. It also upregulates another pathway called the NRF2 pathway. The NRF2 pathway is the pathway that helps you produce more glutathione in your brain as well. So we don't really know if glutathione that we take orally gets into the brain very easily. And probably the nanoliposomal kind of version of it, but probably not the other ones very easily. There's no real transporter for glutathione. We know most of the glutathione is actually made in your brain, that you have in your brain. And so you have to have all the component factors of making your glutathione, but you have to have the stimulation of those factors to be created, to be combined together to make your glutathione, for example. So your cysteine, for example, and other amino acids that make your glutathione. And so what alpha lipoic acid is doing is really becoming this sort of linchpin in mitochondrial support. And so many of us, and I test people all the time for their antioxidant levels and their oxidative stress levels. Alpha lipoic acid levels are almost always low in people, almost always across the board. And that's because of modern life and the inflammation in our brain. And also we have subject to all these heavy metals and toxins. And alpha lipoic acid is one of the best toxin neutralizers out there. It actually can bind and neutralize cadmium, mercury, arsenic, and lead. And so there's very few other compounds that are as comprehensive as it is to help support the brain and the rest of the body too.
So when it comes, how is it actually, so it does these two things. So it works as an antioxidant itself.
Yeah.
And then it's supporting sort of the almost production of our own.
Yeah.
But one thing that you said that was really interesting. So we don't just make glutathione in the liver. We actually make it in the brain itself.
Make it in the brain too, yeah.
I did not know that. I thought it was like solely a liver thing.
Yeah, the brain makes its own glutathione as well.
So in that case, alpha lipoic acid can cross the blood-brain barrier?
Yes, very easily. Yeah, it can very easily cross the blood-brain barrier and get across and help stimulate all these pathways that we just mentioned. It also, not only does it, we've described, it also increases insulin sensitivity. And so you're going to have more glucose that goes into the cell as opposed to if you're more insulin resistant. And so you have to be mildly careful when you take alpha lipoic acid because some people will have a blood glucose drop when they take it, but that's actually beneficial for the cellular health of your brain as well, because it helps the mitochondria become more efficient that way as well because it increases insulin sensitivity.
From an exercise perspective, I know that, it's one of the ones that's really, it was popularized a lot in the endurance community. I remember when I was a runner, that was a big one. Be like, okay, on the days you run more, take more alpha lipoic acid. So is it just all kind of working on that same pathway, as such an oxidative stressor when we're running or doing endurance work?
So that actually brings up a good point though, right? Because you don't necessarily want to have a lot of alpha lipoic acid if you're exercising, right? Because you're going to mitigate some of the oxidative load that might happen and the hormetic stress because of exercise. But if you do a lot of exercise, and especially from on the recovery side, it could be fantastic as a way to help mop up free radicals, improve insulin sensitivity, and help with the mitochondrial function overall as well.
So do you think there's a benefit to taking it almost prophylactically, like before you're going to be going into a stressful situation or anything like that?
Yeah, I think what I can say almost across the board is that almost everybody that I've tested is deficient in alpha lipoic acid. Like it's almost across the board. And so I think almost everybody can benefit from at least some of it on a regular basis. You may need more of it depending on what you're using it for. But in essence, almost all of us need the mitochondrial support because we don't get a lot of alpha lipoic acid in our diet. There's very few sources of this, as you know. And as a result of that, it's important because we have so many stresses on the body now, so many toxic stresses, these heavy metals, these toxic overload from neuroinflammation and everything else that happens as a result of that, insulin resistance, whatever. Like almost everybody can benefit from some element of having some alpha lipoic acid on board.
What's I notice when I take ALA, like urine smell, like it's kind of like an asparagus-y smelling thing.
Yeah.
Is that like, what is that?
Yeah, because alpha lipoic acid has these what's called sulfhydryl groups. It's a sulfur containing antioxidant, and the sulfur groups are actually what bind the oxidants, bind the oxidative stress, so bind the heavy metals, bind the reactive oxygen species, and neutralize them. But sulfur is also sulfury in the sense that it gives that sulfur smell. And so it's a sulfur type of smell that you're getting when you're urinating out your alpha lipoic acid to some degree. And so the higher the amount of alpha lipoic acid you take, the more sulfur containing smell your urine will have.
Interesting. So people that have allergies to like sulfur drugs or anything like that, would they have an issue with it, or is it?
So it's a good question. So some people are more sensitive to sulfur. Now, sulfur containing drugs, it's kind of a separate category. Okay. So sulfur containing drugs like Bactrim, for example, is a very common one. There's also others like Lasix and others that have sulfur. Those drugs are, it's a man-made component of making these drugs. So people tend to be more sensitive to the sulfur in those, but there is some cross reactivity. So that in the sense that some people will be more sensitive to sulfur containing things like glutathione or like alpha lipoic acid, and they may get more sulfur-like symptoms of sometimes in people can cause some oxidative stress itself. So it is something to be aware of, but it's pretty uncommon. Again, always good to start off at a lower dose and increase your dose over time. When I first started working with glutathione, for example, it was actually in a clinic where we're using it IV in people. And that's not always a good idea for people because people take high amounts of glutathione, the sulfur containing aspects of that can cause symptoms in some people. But there's also the sulfur binding to the toxin itself. If you're binding a toxin, you better sure as hell get it out of the system too. Otherwise, what happens is it just goes back into the system and causes toxicity. So it's really important to think about, this is a whole nother conversation about detoxification and the processes of things. But if you're binding a toxin, you have to get rid of it too. So you not only want to bind it, so alpha lipoic acid helps you bind the toxin, but it's not going to necessarily help you expel the toxin as much. This is where binders come into place. This is where sauna comes into play. This is where other detoxification kinds of things come into play. But in general, alpha lipoic acid, we're mostly deficient in it. Most of us could use it on a regular basis. Be careful with it before exercise, maybe after for recovery, especially if you want that hormetic stress of it overall.
Okay, what's another thing that we can take for a neuroprotectant?
So let's talk about magnesium, right? What's your favorite type of magnesium?
I like dimagnesium malate. Personally, that's my favorite, or glycinate before bed. But
glycinate's good. But it's actually threonate, magnesium threonate, that has the highest amount of magnesium that gets in the system when you take it. Now, you can use these for all different reasons. Like there's different ones for sleep, there's different ones, for systemic effect. But for the brain specifically, magnesium threonate actually is the one that gets the highest amount of magnesium in it. So usually I like to have my patients take a mix of these things, right? A mix tends to be best, but magnesium threonate is the one that I typically recommend because it has the highest amount of magnesium that's going to get into the brain itself.
Interesting. So what is it doing from a neuroprotection standpoint?
Yeah.
I know it does have a little bit of an effect on an NMDA receptor, but is it doing something else other than that?
So magnesium threonate, really, it's a carrier in the sense that really what we care about is getting more magnesium in the brain. And then what happens with magnesium is responsible for thousands probably enzymatic reactions in the brain. So one of the major things that it does is helps relax the nervous system or relax the brain. It does that by increasing the conversion of a neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is our primary excitatory neurotransmitter, to GABA. So it's one of the cofactors that is responsible. So GABA is our relaxing neurotransmitter in the brain. And so many of us are GABA deficient these days because of stress, because of poor conversion, because of lack of magnesium. And magnesium is one of those minerals that's deficient in many people. I can't remember the last statistics I read, but it was like over 50% of the US population is magnesium deficient. And so this is a big deal, and especially in the brain where you need a lot of magnesium. So magnesium's help converting that glutamate over to GABA. It's also making the GABA receptor more sensitive for GABA to bind to it. So it increases the affinity of GABA to bind to its receptor. And so again, GABA is our primary relaxing neurotransmitter. It helps us calm down the firing of our brain. It's like the brakes of our brain. And in addition, you were mentioning this just a minute ago, but magnesium also is what's called an NMDA antagonist. So it blocks the glutamate receptor as well. So it makes glutamate less effective. And so glutamate, when you have an overabundance of glutamate, toxicity or whatever you want to, there's not always toxicity, but it's the MSG syndrome. It's the MSG syndrome where you feel irritable, your mood is not cool, you feel tremors, feel like angry, that kind of thing. That's your glutamate overload. And so what magnesium can do is block those receptors. And as a result of that receptor blocking, you have the capacity to have less glutamate effectiveness as well as more GABAergic tone. Magnesium is also really important for energy production, as you likely know, and it increases ATP production. It's a cofactor on multiple of the intermediates in the citric acid cycle. The citric acid cycle is in our mitochondria that helps us make energy overall. It also helps regulate and modulate many other neurotransmitter systems. Your dopamine system, your serotonin system, your acetylcholine system are all regulated by magnesium. So if you don't have enough magnesium around, you're not going to feel very good is what it comes down to. So these are just some of the major things that it works on. But magnesium, as I mentioned, has hundreds, if not thousands of important roles in the nervous system, in the brain. It's also a vasodilator as well, so you can use magnesium to help dilate blood vessels a little bit. These are at high doses for in IV for things like preeclampsia in women, but at lower doses it's still a vasodilator, and I use it almost in all my patients are getting a magnesium. All my patients are on alpha lipoic acid because these are really deficient in almost everybody. I like to test to see what's going on and optimize to the tests and then check levels over time. That's really ideal if you can. But finding natural sources of alpha lipoic acid are hard. I didn't talk about what those are. Briefly, those are liver, brewer's yeast, and spinach. But be careful how much spinach you eat. It's not going to make you Popeye probably. And magnesium, it's going to give you kidney stones instead. Magnesium, in general, mineral content of our food is down dramatically over the last 70, 80 years. And so it's hard to get enough magnesium in your diet. But typically this is going to be it would be in plants ideally, because plants would have minerals, but you don't get as much as you used to. So you can get it from meat, obviously. You can get it from mineral water. Mineral water has magnesium in it as well, but not a lot. But it's hard. It's hard to get enough magnesium in your diet.
What kind of dosage do you recommend for people with Mag3 and 8?
It's a range. What do you typically see?
For dimagnesium malate, I take 400 to 600 milligrams at night.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll take more. Like the thing, I like dimagnesium malate because it's a little bit slower absorbing. So I'm not going to, if I do go up north of 800 milligrams, I'm not seatbelted to the toilet. I feel like I don't really have an issue. Maybe slightly looser stools, but nothing insane.
Yeah.
But with 3 and 8, I haven't really messed with a whole lot, so I don't know if the dosage would be the same.
It's lower. Lower. It's typically somewhere like 100 to 300 milligrams, I believe, maybe a little bit higher than that, depending on the person. It doesn't typically have any GI effects for most people. It can, but any magnesium can cause GI effects for some people. But the magnesium citrate and magnesium oxide are the ones that you want to avoid unless you need them, and then you can take them. It's better than taking Miralax or some other laxative to go poop. But magnesium is an underappreciated. We talk about it a lot now, but I think getting the highest levels in the brain with 3 and 8, so often taking a mix. I often have my patients take a mix of the magnesiums. Sometimes take some during the day, and then others that more like the malate at night. That's going to help you with more relaxation as well. So it just depends on the person, but I like to mix it up.
Okay. What about anything else as far as a neuroprotectant?
Yeah, so the one I've been really excited about lately is something called cordycepin. And cordycepin is the most active ingredient in the cordyceps mushroom. You've heard of the cordyceps mushroom, right? So cordyceps, the mushroom itself, has been around. We've known about it for over 10,000 years, probably in Chinese medicine. It's got a really cool history and story. It's called the zombie mushroom. Yeah. And if anybody's watched the show on HBO called The Last of Us, this is a show about a mutant cordyceps mushroom. And the reason why is that these mushrooms themselves, the cordyceps mushroom, they get called the zombie mushroom because they take over the nervous system of insects and they make them into zombie producing factories. So they'll actually make the insect go to a place that's the perfect location to grow the mushroom, and then take over the mushroom, eat it from take over the insect, take it over from the inside out and make it into a mushroom producing factory. So back 10,000 years ago in China, they would see this mushroom and see what had happened in the life cycle of it. And they were like, there's something amazing about this particular mushroom to be able to do that, to be able to do it. And so for thousands of years, it's been used for cardiac health, pulmonary health, kidney health. There's even good studies now on cordyceps for increasing VO2 max training and ATP production. And a lot of that's related to this compound called cordycepin. So cordycepin is the most active component of the mushroom. It is about 0.03% of the mushroom itself. So a very small amount of the mushroom itself. There's a lot of other things in there. There's polysaccharides, there's antioxidants, there's vitamins, other things like that. But the cordycepin itself is a profound anti-inflammatory. And it works that way because it works on the adenosine system. You and I have talked about adenosine a little bit before. Adenosine has many different roles. One of the main roles that it has in the brain is that there's neurotransmitters in the brain that bind adenosine, and adenosine will make you feel sleepy. Adenosine gives you sleep pressure. And so one of the roles of cordycepin is that it works just like adenosine, no matter where adenosine is. So in the brain, it's going to work on the adenosine receptors there to increase sleep pressure. So you can use it to increase deep sleep, which is fantastic. That's just one thing that it can do. In addition, as a result of it working like adenosine in the body, in our DNA or on our DNA, we have base pairs. We have adenosine, we have guanine, we have cytosine, we have thymine. I think it's adenosine, guanine, and cytosine, guanine, and adenosine, thymine. That's how they base together. Or adenine is actually what it's called. So adenine is basically adenosine. So what cordycepin can do is actually can block the replication of fast replicating things like microbes and potentially cancer as well. So it's being studied as an antimicrobial and as an anti-cancer because it can block the production of the DNA base pairs as it's being replicated with polymerases that are responsible for creating new RNA and new DNA, that kind of thing. And so it's being used in that capacity. But in addition, as it being part of the adenosine system, it works on significant anti-inflammatory pathways. So what it does is it downregulates your NF-kappa B pathway. So we talked about that for alpha-lipoic acid. It's the same thing for your cordycepin. So NF-kappa B is your inflammatory pathway. So we need some inflammation, of course, right? But we don't need a lot of it. And oftentimes, our bodies have a hard time shutting down inflammation over time, and these cytokines and interleukins and TNF alpha get released. And so the cordycepin can come in and downregulate your NF-kappa B pathway and downregulate the production of all those inflammatory cytokines. And there's also a significant impact on your immune system. And it's been studied now in allergies and asthma because it can regulate the balance between something called your Th1 and Th2 system. So these are your T cells, part of your immune system, and the balance between 1 and 2 is very important. If you have too much on one side or the other, you can get an imbalance and get more allergies, asthma, those kinds of symptoms. And so you can get a rebalance of the system using the cordycepin. And so it's been studied in allergies and asthma and things like that too, to balance that. So you have this downregulation of inflammation using the cordycepin, and you also have a revving up of your AMPK pathways as well. So AMPK is very important. It's a signaling pathway that prevents us from creating more anabolic state, and at the same time it allows a breakdown for more catabolic state. So it helps you break down your fats, break down your glucose, but it prevents mTOR from regulating from rising. And so as a result of that, mTOR is good if you need it for exercise, but you also don't want too much mTOR all the time because it can give you a risk of cancer, degeneration, and things like that. So cordycepin is working by downregulating mTOR, upregulating AMPK, and downregulating NF-kappa B. And so as a result of all that, you have this profound capacity to decrease inflammation in the system and work on neuroinflammation specifically.
Interesting. So is it, if someone was to take just a cordyceps mushroom, like they're getting all these other things too. Is it like that much of a concentrated amount of cordycepin? Because the problem that I have with I take cordyceps mushroom itself is I actually kind of get amped. It sounds like cordycepin is a little bit different. Yeah.
So the cordyceps mushroom is typically taken in the morning for that reason, because it does give you more of that amped feeling. And part of that reason is that it doesn't have as much of an effect on the adenosine system in the brain because of the other molecules that are in, other compounds that are in the actual mushroom. This is actually what's been studied to increase your VO2 max. But the cool way around that is you can take high potency cordycepin with caffeine. And if you take some caffeine, that's going to block your adenosine receptors in your brain. So all your cordycepin is going to get diverted to exercise performance overall, which is kind of fun. So that's why you get more energy. But they're using cordyceps. They've been using it for thousands of years as an anti-cancer, as an energy enhancer for those reasons. But because cordycepin, the way I use it is a high potency, like 75 or 150 milligrams. Again, in a 1 gram mushroom, you're going to get 0.03% cordycepin. So it's a very small amount of cordycepin. So we're making it a very high potency overall and making it into a product that way. You're getting this high amount of cordycepin in the system. You're getting much more of a stimulus for that deep sleep, the adenosine system. You can use a small amount with caffeine to see that performance benefit. But in general, having people take it at night, because that's when they're going to see the deep sleep benefit. That's when they get the anti-inflammatory benefit of it. And but it's one of those things where, and the antimicrobial benefit too. So it's one of those things where you may not notice a difference right away when you first start taking it, but after taking it for a little while, you will start seeing a difference. Your sleep will be better. Your overall will feel better the next day because the inflammatory cascades are better. Like I'm using it a lot in my patients with chronic complex medical stuff with a lot of inflammation that's just not getting better. I'm using people post-infection. I'm using people that are like going on airplanes, for example, and then they're subject to the inflammation of being on an airplane and that kind of thing. Using it a lot in other circumstances as well, especially when you feel like something's coming on, like a antimicrobial kind of thing. Like you can take it for the first couple of days and like you see yourself getting better very fast. And I get stories every week about taking high strength cordycepin in the antimicrobial aspect of things, especially.
Yeah, you had me start taking Tromune, which is your product that has it. You had it, for sleep issues because I didn't want to take melatonin, right? I didn't want to. You're like, well, just take one of these, and that was some serious deep sleep with it. And it's not like a melatonin-y feeling. It's just like your sleep, everything's normal. You just feel like you got a little bit deeper sleep. So that's how I first got turned on to it. You have a product called Tromune, where that's the active component is the cordycepin itself, and it's in that cool little kind of troche form. Yeah. So you can titrate your dose and do all that. Yeah.
So we came across cordycepin when we were looking at creating something called Troz, which is our sleep product, and our sleep product has 8 different ingredients in it. One of them is cordycepin, and that's the one that increases deep sleep. But when we looked at the research, we're like, this has got so many other amazing potential benefits. So we increase the dose. We have something called Tromune. As you said, it's 75 milligrams. If you're a practitioner, we have something called Troplusmune, which is 150. But 75 milligrams is really great for most people. And as you said, it's a troche form. So it's something you can easily titrate. You start with a quarter, a half, or a full. But I have either people like me who have 4 kids at the house that are subject to stuff all the time. I'm taking it regularly, like prophylactically at low doses, and then I increase the dose when something's coming in the house, that kind of thing, or I'm going traveling, or I'm going to be under a more stressful situation, something like that. That's the other way to do it. So you either take it prophylactically regularly, or you can take it when you know you're going to be under more stress. But you mentioned the deep sleep thing, which is super cool because I've had a number of people reach out to me. They don't take our Troz, they just take our Tromune for sleep. And what I find like when I look at my data, and people will tell me this too, is that you'll often find most people get their deep sleep when they first go to bed at night. What Tromune can do is often give you a second bout of deep sleep earlier or closer to the morning. So typically around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning is when I typically find it for most people. And most people aren't used to getting that kind of deep sleep then. Yeah. So some people, if you wake up super early, you might feel like slightly groggier initially when you first take it, but it's not like a melatonin groggy at all. Like it wears off very, very quickly. But my wife, for example, if she's like feeling like she's going to get sick, she'll make me give her a full troche because she doesn't listen to me for anything. So that she actually will take Tromune is like, it's a huge win for me because she gets that cold that 5-7 days, and then she gets that cough that doesn't go away for like a month. And so if I can get her to take Tromune right in the beginning, like it's a game changer for her. And so she'll ask me where the green stuff is because it's green colored. And so she'll take a full Tromune, and she's like a sleep champion. And people like my wife, that's why they live so long. She has very good genetics. It's a champion sleep. Like she can sleep through anything. And so when she wakes up after Tromune, like a full dose, she might feel a little bit groggy when she first wakes up, but she's okay with that because she feels better. For sure. So it's a bit of a thing, but some people will take it just for the sleep benefit. But obviously when you also sleep better, when you're not feeling well, you're going to heal better too, because sleep is what our parents and have always said is the best medicine, right? Yeah. If I can get my kids to sleep, I'm sure you've seen this in yours, I will just force my child to stay in bed for an entire day, and they'll be better the next day. Yeah, if I can get them to sleep. So
no, it's legit. It's very legit. We have a son that's like that. This is just like he listens to his body, and just boom, go to bed. He'll sleep for 16 hours and then just be fine. Like I
love it.
I wish.
I wish. Yeah. And I do with my kids. I give them a little bit of Troimmune and it goes a long way. I mean, I don't recommend doing that unless you're working with a practitioner, but in my kids, I use a lot of Troimmune. It's fantastic, man. I give them like a little quarter of our troche and then they're better in a couple days, if not the next day. And then everybody's taking it, my whole family, when we're traveling. We'll be going on spring break next week with everybody and the kids, and everybody will have it, make sure we have it on board. Even my wife will take it. Like I said, she doesn't listen to me about anything. So it's kind of fun to see her take that one, but it's a fantastic anti-inflammatory. So that's a unique one. Our Troimmune is very unique. There's no other companies out there that have a high potency product like we do. I think Cordyceps is great otherwise, but what I like to do for my athletes is have them take a little bit of the Cordycepin with caffeine in the morning. It's a great pre-workout boost overall.
Interesting. I'll have to try that one. Yeah, it's kind of redirecting. I'll link out to it down below as well, so that way everyone can check it out. It definitely was out of your products. It was the last one that I tried, and it was one of those where I kind of wish it was the first one that I tried, because it didn't occur to me just how the Cordycepin would work. I'm like, I've taken Cordyceps before, and like all I get is like a little bit of a energy boost out of it. So I'll link out to that in the top line of the description. Yeah, it's our sleeper product, man. Like I'm just so impressed across the board. But it's not the first thing that people would think of when they think of our company. But when they get into our ecosystem and see what we've created, for me, like my mainstays and the people that I work with are Methylene Blue and Cordycepin. So our Just Blue and our Troimmune is hands down for almost everybody, because it's inflammatory support and energy support during the day, and it's inflammatory support and sleep support at night. And so the combination has just been transformative personally. I have 4 children. Somebody's always got something. And then also for my patients as well. And we get tons of stories. I just got one this morning before we started about how amazing Troimmune's working for her and for her patients. And yeah, it's a fantastic compound for neuroprotection, neuroinflammation, and I'm really excited about where it's going to go. What else we're going to see from it. Yeah. And the 2 that I would add is one that we've talked about before. Like for me, I can talk about my personal stack. Like Methylene Blue for me, for brain, for
sure.
100%. We've done a deep dive on it, so it's maybe not worth doing a dive on this video, but definitely worth mentioning. Yeah. And then another one for me, which maybe not so much as a neuroprotectant, but for me on days that I'm sleep deprived, starting my day with like upping it to 10 grams creatine, like first thing in the morning, because that's and there's some relatively recent evidence on that showing even in a short-term effect on sleep deprivation. So it's like, okay, there's always going to be those nights, probably frequently, where you just don't sleep well. Noticeable difference by front-loading my creatine at a pretty decent dose, 10 to 15 grams, which sounds wild, but it's really perfectly fine. Yeah. And that at least gives me a good solid 4 or 5 hours of good working energy with my brain before I start to degrade after a bad night of sleep. Otherwise, I've got enough adrenaline in my system to get me through a couple hours. I can usually wake up, after 4 hours of crappy sleep and be like, all right, I can get through 2 hours, but then I'm worthless.
Yeah. The big thing with your brain too is like, let it shut off, please, right? Most of us are not letting our brains shut down. And so always being sympathetically dominant, always being in fight or flight is really bad for your brain. Yeah. Really bad for your stress, your cortisol level rise, and your GABA levels drop dramatically. And so you really want to be thinking about working on your GABAergic tone, working on your parasympathetic tone. So I'm often very much thinking about obviously supporting the brain, and from an inflammatory perspective is very important, like as we've been discussing, but working on the GABA system is really, really important too. So we have Trocom and Troz at Transcriptions that are really great for down-regulating the nervous system, getting the brakes back on. This doesn't take the place, or at least it helps to do things like learning how to shut off, not be scrolling next to your phone right before you go to bed, not yelling at your spouse and then trying to go to sleep, or yelling at your employees every day. Like trying to find ways to chill the out would be great, right? But supplementation there can be very, very helpful. And so that's another one that's big on neurodegeneration for me. And neuroprotection is sympathetic downregulation, parasympathetic upregulation. That's usually with the GABAergic neurotransmitter system.
Right on, man. Well, Scott, where can everyone find you, man?
So I'm on Instagram at Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottSherr. And you can find everything about Transcriptions at transcriptions.com, at Transcriptions. If you go to our website, our blog is full of great blogs on all of the things we discussed today, especially Cordycepin, obviously, the zombie mushroom and all the cool things about that. And transcriptions.com.
Right on, my man. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Thanks.